Hi, it's Dennis Daly. During the nearly 20 years I did weekly broadcasts for UPI Radio, I took my mic on the road as often as I could. One of my favorite trips was to Anaheim, California. Yes, I did go to Disneyland, but I went nearby too to the Anaheim Convention Center. It was the annual convention of natural products and foods. I was the guest of the Natrol Company. Dr. Terry Willard is one of the nation's best-known herbalists. As a matter of fact, he has an international reputation. He calls himself a herbalist. I forgive him for that because he's from Canada and pronounces the word slightly differently. We talked on the convention floor about a variety of things, but the first thing I mentioned to Dr. Willard, to Terry, is the fact that years ago, before there were big drug companies and drugstore chains, doctors depended upon the knowledge of apothecaries and their own knowledge of herbs and roots and natural medicines.
There's no question the first medicines on the planet were herbs and medicinal substances like that. At the same time, I would have to easily say that even today, 80% of the world's population uses botanical remedies as their major form of medicine. It's only isolated North America that does not use it as their major form of medicine.
Tell us a little bit about you to start with, where you're from and your background and how you began work in all of this.
Well, I'm from Canada. I have clinics and colleges in both Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and Vancouver, BC. We have the largest herbal college in North America, where we have 3-year clinical herbalist programs. I'm also a clinician, and I run one of the student clinics, so I see patients day in and day out.
That would seem to be an advantage because you're certainly not in an ivory tower when it comes to the application of what you're doing.
No, it's very important for us to as much be able to utilize the things on a day-to-day basis. It's one thing to read an academic paper on how cat's claw works and how it works in these things, but if you don't work with the patients on a day-to-day basis, you don't really get the actual feel. So I have to do that both for my academia to be able to work with the students, but at the same time to be able to have practical results for the customers that we're trying to serve.
Let's start at the beginning and if you will, take us through the common herbs that are used, and you say we in North America are more biased against that type of thinking. What is being used around the world and for what? And I'm sure we need more than an hour to talk about that.
Well, one of the most popular herbs these days is echinacea. Echinacea is used for the immune system. The problem is that some of these herbs have become so popular so fast that all the echinaceas of the world are not alike. So from my point of view, I don't want to use echinacea unless it's a guaranteed potency echinacea. What I mean by that is the echinacea is not just the plant called echinacea, its potency is strong enough, so we only want grade A. So it's actually passed through a machine like an HPLC or a thin layer chromatography machine to be able to determine what its potency is, and then we'll only accept ones at a certain potency level to be able to use in our clinics.
From the floor of the Expo, we're talking to internationally known herbalist Dr. Terry Willard, who is an advisor for the Natrol Company. Before the break, he was mentioning that there was one particular herb that is known in a lot of different ways, and we were getting into potency. I mentioned to him that it's very confusing for the layman with ginseng being in different forms and different companies advertising different things to not really know what you're getting sometimes.
Well, definitely. For example, with ginseng, pure is not best. I mean, aspirins are pure, right? If you take all the rest of the chemicals out and just have the ginsengicides, that wouldn't be a good answer. So with herbs, it's a little bit more of a finessing. Let's say we had an orchestra and we said that an orchestra has an oboe in it. We wouldn't want a pure oboe for our symphony, would we?
No.
We want a multitude of various chemicals, constituents, and from a Chinese point of view, personality related to it or chi patterns related to it. So it's different grades of it. So pureness and potency are not the most important issue. If you want to go out and meet a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever the case may be, you're not going to look for the purest boy or the purest whatever. You want someone who's going to fit into your personality set. Someone that has a fuller range of personality, physical, emotional, and mental attributes. Herbs are the same way.
Do you find that there is still a lot of resistance to that kind of thinking? Is it coming, and I don't want to open a Pandora's box here, is it coming from the medical establishment? Is it coming from people who are just classically ignorant of this whole area? Where is, if there is a negative movement against the use of herbs and natural medicines, from where is that coming?
Well, an awful lot of it's come from our bigotry or our bias of our own educational system. When I was brought up, I got a PhD in science, and I was brought up that science was reality. Now we're starting to understand that science is just one take on reality. Certainly it's got a lot of information about reality, but it's not reality itself. And so we think everything has to be scientifically validated, and that gives a bias. Now, point in fact, a lot of people don't think that these herbs are scientifically validated, but they really are. We have an awful lot of double-blind studies and all kinds of clinical validation on the botanicals. So a lot of people think that they're not that important because, one, they just come from Earth, they don't come through a specific lab, and at the same time, there's not sophisticated tests done on them, and there definitely is.
Terry, if we can, let us go through some of the common names of herbs people have heard about. I talked about ginseng. What is it, and what is it being used for?
Well, ginseng, for example, is there's several different types of ginseng. That's fairly significant in itself. There's Oriental ginseng, and there's Western ginseng, or American ginseng. The Oriental ginseng gives you more energy and is kind of yang, as the Chinese would say. But if we want to put a personality to it, we'd almost say it's macho in nature. So this is the ginseng that's very good for building your energy, but you would not want to take it if you have high blood pressure. You would not want to take this if you have high cholesterol or get fevers and things like this. Or if a female takes it for too long, they get secondary male sexual characters. They start growing beard and mustache. So if a woman doesn't want that, they might not do that. Whereas the American ginseng will give you the energy, but it will lower blood pressure. It won't raise blood pressure. So we can use this for different situations. But probably the major reason that people use ginseng or think they should use ginseng is it's purported to be an aphrodisiac. Well, it's not really an aphrodisiac or a sexual tonic. What it will do is give you enough energy that you might have time left over at the end of the day to be able to enjoy it, yes. But from a personality point of view, we can kind of look at this from a ginseng thing. For example, the Oriental ginseng is kind of like a one-night stand. Or the American ginseng is kind of like an ongoing relationship. If you take both of them and put them together, what you've got is a situation where you've got an ongoing relationship that's always like a one-night stand.
It's the best of both worlds.
It's the best of both worlds. So what we like to do at ginseng is we like to combine them together. So what I've done is I've taken 4 ginsengs together and have a thing called 4 ginsengs, and this will give us the attributes of several different types of ginsengs put together, so we don't have to worry about if you take it too long, if you're a female, you're going to get secondary sexual characteristics, etc., etc.
Let me ask a question based upon my own life experience. I'm one of those people who's let myself get out of shape and is in an industry where I work wretched hours. I had my shift changed 2 months ago where now I work midnight to 8 a.m. Tried to sleep for part of a day, flew out here to the West Coast. It's the middle of the night for me right now. But there are a lot of people who work shift work, who have to change their sleep schedule around. From what you know about metabolism and about natural products, what advice would you give those people?
Well, probably the most important herb for this is called reishi. Reishi is a herb from China, and it will help you get back into your circadian rhythm cycles very well. It's a very important herb in a formula from China that says to protect an academic from their own brain. So lots of times that people get out of their circadian rhythms, they can't shut their brain down, and it's racing away at the wrong time. So
that's why I can't sleep?
It's insomnia. It's an insomnia situation from that. So by taking that, that'll calm you down and put you in a rhythm. If you mix that with herbs like valerian, that can help you sleep. Or you can work with some of the new hormonal type therapies that are in the natural health industry, like melatonin. That will help work your circadian rhythms. If you put all these things together, you'll be able to build up the right rhythms for you. If you're only doing 1 or 2 or 3 formulas, there's no problem. Fortunately, they don't have interaction. The worst thing to do, you could waste some money. But if you do have a dramatic health problem, like a cancer or HIV positive, obviously you should go to a practitioner that understands the area to be able to work with you and your body. But I did put together a book called Herbs, Their Clinical Uses, and what it does is it goes through over 200 different health problems, like ADD or arthritis or chronic fatigue syndrome. And working with those things, it goes through a specific program that a person should do, what herbs and vitamins they should take for breakfast, lunch, and supper. By putting together programs like that, a person can often own their own body and do it themselves. But it doesn't leave out the situation where a person might want to go to a practitioner.
Terry, you mentioned melatonin. I was going to get there eventually. It is probably, I would say, during the past year, the most publicized product that's come out. Time and Newsweek have run cover stories. What is melatonin, basically? What do you think about it, and what are people using it for?
Well, first of all, the major thing people are using it for is just what you said, for insomnia and to get their circadian rhythms back in place. Our body naturally produces it in our pituitary, and in the process of producing it, it helps us get ourselves back into a sleep pattern situation. So it will help us sleep. What do I think about it? From my experience clinically using it for the last 5 years, about 50% of the people works really well on. About 25% of the people it kind of works on, and about 25% of the people doesn't work at all.
That's not unusual for any kind of medication, though, is it?
It definitely is not. At the same time, though, we've had very, very good success. I can't tell you how many patients that it's been a situation that's really changed their life. If they weren't doing something like melatonin, they were ready to almost go crazy to the degree that they're going to have to be doing something much worse like Prozac or something along those lines.
Well, listen, I went through a period a couple of months ago where I was almost in a panic. I was sleeping 13, 14 hours one day, 2 hours the next. I was running around shaking as if I had just driven all the way from Indiana back to Washington, D.C. with no sleep. And psychologically, I was getting into this terror where I had never felt as out of control with my body as I had, and I was going nuts. I mean, it was really driving me crazy.
So melatonin would help in that situation, but that herb I talked about before, reishi, would even be better on an ongoing basis. It would help so you didn't get into that terror space. It would help so your mind would calm down and your whole mental concepts calm down. The interesting thing about this, when it calms you down, it doesn't make your mind lazy. It actually makes it more productive and more depth. When I say to protect an academic for their own mind, I give it to a lot of professors at the university, and we find that it actually will get a person to be able to utilize their mental concepts better. It's almost like you give them an extra 8 megabytes of RAM on their motherboard or whatever the case may be.
What have we as a society created as far as this rat race? I know there's always been some kind of rat race, but a lot of people you talk to, aren't they just in this, take the kids to Cub Scouts and you got a meeting tonight and a paper due tomorrow? I mean, I can't imagine that 100 years ago we had this kind of worries.
Well, definitely that is the case, that we're trying to achieve in a year what we might have achieved in 10 years before. I mean, let's face it, a person would write a letter and get the information back from a person 3 or 4 weeks later. Now you fax a person, you're mad if you don't get it in 5 minutes. So that kind of situation. But herbs will often help us literally put ourselves back in touch with nature to a degree to be able to create those rhythms. The North American Indian feels that herbs are really an extension of the Mother Earth. You might call it Gaia, might call it nature. And that extension is actually helping to ground us out and be able to calm us down and make us more realistic.
Terry, let's walk a little bit. I want to soak in some of the atmosphere here. This is an incredible convention here at the Anaheim Convention Center. You are working with Natrol, based in Chatsworth, California. First of all, before we talk about some of the things you can see at a convention like this, how did you get involved with Natrol, and what role do you play in helping them chemically, scientifically with their products?
Well, first of all, I wrote a series of textbooks on herbal medicines of a biochemical nature. And so they came and approached me and asked me if I would be interested in working with them. I said I was only interested in working with them if they were willing to put everything in a guaranteed potency format. The reason I wanted that is I wanted to make sure the quality of products in North America met a certain standard. And unfortunately, there's so many different companies out here, an awful lot of them don't do that.
Well, wouldn't it be almost impossible to give any kind of advice to people, particularly in a fine line textbook form, and not be able to, if the word is prescribe, the potency you want? I mean, you've mentioned earlier that I said ginseng. That's a large umbrella.
It definitely is. So to make sure there is a guaranteed potency is very important. So that helped me tie the first knot with Natrol. Then we've been working along, and they put out a very good fine quality of product that I'm happy with. And so they've hired me to formulate different products.
A fellow we have been talking to is certainly an expert, known around the world for his expertise and his writings. He is Canadian Dr. Terry Willard. He is also one of the chief advisors of the Natrol Company, one of the nation's largest producers of natural food supplements, vitamins, and other products. I asked Dr. Willard about the fact that Natrol goes out of its way, if you will, to make sure that everything is standard potency and tested in an industry where there are a lot of people out there who are a little bit less scrupulous than that.
Well, that's definitely true. I mean, obviously, in any kind of area, there's going to be a lot of hype. And because Natrol is willing to support the educational system with books and with correspondence courses and things like that, you can see that they're really putting their money where their mouth is and trying to be able to go that extra mile.
I was talking about the convention where we're meeting here. It's incredible. We're not only talking about food supplements, but here's a group here that's pushing hot peppers.
Jalapeno peppers and the Mexican way, right beside a capsulating machine that's a fast fill machine. So it is an interesting thing. You've got a huge variety of things that we can see here, from botanical medicines to yogurt.
Yeah, I was telling a friend of mine the other day that I can remember a time when you had to be what was called a health food nut to eat yogurt, and they hadn't figured out how to make it taste good. And it used to be you'd go to the dairy case and there would be 14 feet of cottage cheese and maybe yogurt if you can find it, and now it's the exact reverse.
Yeah, it definitely is. So there is a big, as the baby boomers get a little older, there's a big, huge trend in the industry of what can be done. And so I think it's really going a lot more mainstream. For example, I've been coming to this show now for 17 years, and the show is about 30% larger this year than it ever has been before.
Over those years, and now with your association with Natrol Company, what different questions have you seen people ask? Maybe I should phrase that, how have the questions people ask changed as people have become more aware of this?
Well, people are definitely getting more critical about what they want to know and the quality of the product they're working with. That's been a very big change. Before, it used to be that everyone just wanted to get some echinacea. Now we have to guarantee how much polysaccharides and how many phenol groups are actually in the echinacea. Also, people are coming in with more sophisticated health problems, and the general public is getting much more educated in the whole situation.
So it's more mainstream to some extent.
Oh, definitely it's more mainstream. I would say even in our clinics in Canada, our customer base, client base is really expanded to be ma and pa, everything. So it's everybody these days.
Would you say that problems in the bedroom and problems sleeping, which would seem to be two opposite things euphemistically, are the two most common things you get asked about? What are the areas if those are not?
Well, those are common, but actually the most common problem we run into is a yeast problem called Candida albicans, which, by the way, can cause both those ones you just said. If you have a big yeast infection, it lowers one's sex drive, and at the same time it gives you insomnia and makes you tired all day long. So that could be related to the two that you've just marked on. That'd be one of the most common problems, but certainly we see arthritis. I certainly get an awful lot of cancer patients being a senior practitioner. HIV has become very normal. Fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome are very, very major areas to work with.
Can we talk about chronic fatigue for half a second? I don't want to depart from that. I know that early on in that bout I had with just complete zombie-ness, I thought maybe it was chronic fatigue. Historically, I've always been the kind of person who needed 9 to 10 hours sleep a night. I've always been on the high end of the curve. And like a lot of people, went through depression in my 20s, and I think I kind of sublimated. All I did was sleep to get away from reality. How does a person look at themselves and say, is this malaise I have the result of chronic fatigue or my work situation or stress? Is that a difficult thing to diagnose because of the other things that can cause insomnia?
Well, it definitely is a difficult thing to diagnose. And so the Center of Disease Control has designated that it has to last for more than 6 months before it's called chronic fatigue. At the same time, there's a host, it's kind of like a Chinese menu. There's 3 columns, and you have to have so many things from each column to be officially called chronic fatigue. The reason being is there is no actual clinical test you can prove that a person has chronic fatigue. So it's a period of time, et cetera, et cetera. What you went through was just a little bit of a burnout syndrome from lack of R&R.
Well, Terry, I thank you for the work you're doing, and I appreciate you having me here. And what is that I'm supposed to get for my back now?
We're going to get some Kava Kava, because that's going to chill you out and relax your back, and it's going to make you feel really good, and you won't be able to argue with anyone anymore.
Terry, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
For the first 2/3 of this show, we've been talking to a Canadian physician who is one of the world's foremost expert on herbs, herbalist Dr. Terry Willard. The Natrol Company, one of the exhibitors at this year's Natural Products Expo at the Convention Center, is the brainchild of a gentleman named Elliot Balbert, who is also a neat guy, a self-made man, and I sat down with Elliot at the convention and asked him about the history of his company and a little bit about himself. I think you'll find him personable with some very articulate thoughts about where the world of natural foods and food supplements is going.
Well, let's see. What part of the story will be interesting for everyone to hear? The company was started in December of 1980 when I decided that it was time that I needed to put some food on the table and clothe and shelter my family. And the employment that I had at that time wasn't doing it. So it occurred to me that I might want to start a cosmetic company, and that I was going to sell a shampoo and conditioner into health food stores in the United States. And so Natrol was started as a cosmetic company in 1980. And the name Natrol is actually a contraction of the words natural control or natural cosmetics. And I am living proof that one person can do everything wrong all at the same time when you start a company. Because I had the wrong size package and the wrong price point and the wrong formula and the wrong distribution network and undercapitalized and underfinanced, and I proved that you can mess up every possible way when you start a company.
But you're here today.
Well, yes, we are, because from obviously from the depths of desperation and starvation comes, an aha. And actually, it was an accident. In those days, my dad was alive, and one day he came home and he said, I saw this pill that they were selling in the pharmacies, and it was a starch blocker pill. And gee, you ought to get into this pill business, son. And so, always listening to my father, because you do those things as a son, or else they beat you up. I decided it was time to start selling pills, and so I went down to the local pill presser and made some arrangements to buy these starch blocker products, which I did. I didn't have any money to pay for it, but I bought the products and started selling the vitamins. And we instantly hit the market with the right product at the right time, and it started to sell. Unfortunately, in those days, the FDA had different opinions of starch blockers and decided to stop the sales of all starch blockers in the country. So just when we got started selling vitamins, but the fact is, what happened was that it got me pointed in a direction of a category that was intriguing to me and very interesting. Healthcare, alternative healthcare, people taking charge of their lives, and nothing wrong with listening to your doctor and telling you to take a medicine for whatever might ail you, but there were options. And the dietary supplement field really intrigued me. And bit by bit, step by step, building block by building block, we started to develop formulas, develop products. In some cases, we had doctors that would come to us and say, gee, could you make this type of formula for us? In other cases, some of the suppliers of raw materials would say, here's a great new nutrient that we'd like to bring to market. And gee, Elliot, would you and your Natrol company like to sell it? And so product concepts came to us in different ways and in different methods. And after 15 years, we're an overnight success.
You bring up something there I think a lot of people forget, that before this huge umbrella of pharmaceutical companies came about, doctors would send a note down to the local apothecary and say, mix this up for me and put this in it and put that in it. So traditionally, we've had a time where the physician or the dispenser has made his own formula.
That's absolutely correct. And in a lot of respects, it's been 100 years. And medicine, in many respects in this country, as we know it, is almost coming full circle, because we're seeing the traditional MDs looking at this whole area as realizing that it's an adjunct to their conventional therapy, and that blending different formulations and different nutrients, whether it's vitamins, minerals, herbs, amino acids, or other dietary cofactors, have a role in their treatment and therapy of their patients. And this movement has just begun. It's going to be remarkable, but I think your listeners and what we as citizenry of this country is going to see in the next decade or two. There's no question about it. It's happening. Take melatonin, for example. Yes, it's a hormone. It's not, as we would say, a traditional vitamin or mineral. But here's something that the medical profession absolutely is embracing as a natural, although it's synthetically manufactured, as a natural method of helping a sleep condition or assisting with normal sleep patterns, instead of the traditional approaches that we've been taking for the last 20 or 30 years to get a good night's sleep. I mean, this is one small example. I think we're going to see this in a lot of the attitude of the...
Now, I don't want to bash the establishment here. I grew up in the shadow of Eli Lilly in Indiana, and a lot of good, wonderful grant money and projects I worked for came from Eli Lilly. But isn't it tough for some physicians who went through the traditional training to branch out? I mean, isn't there a propensity in the training of doctors to stay within that fine line of what some people would say is accepted medicine?
Yeah, no, absolutely correct. It's very difficult for the professional field to look at alternative health care with legitimacy. It's been very difficult for them. It's impossible. With all due respect to their they have a great need. I'm very much a support of that profession, no question about it. But it's hard for them to break out of the mold because of their training and their schooling and their background. And then if it doesn't have double-blind crossover studies that shows a percentage of increase or usage, it's very hard for them to buy into alternative health care. Having said that, what's happening is that our end of the industry or the business is coming forward with better science, is coming forward with better documentation, is showing that it's not a pig in a poke. It isn't some guy in a back room that's just blending up a batch full of herbs and saying it cures such and such. So both types of industries are coming to the center road. There's a place for both. That's really the issue.
Now, we are seeing, for example, when in terms of health insurance even, that chiropractic for the first time is being recognized. How important to your industry is the baby boomer generation getting older, the people from the 60s who were willing to branch out? Do you see that as a factor at all in the acceptance of this?
The silverizing, what I like to call it, the silverizing of America, as we all say from all different industries, and in relationship to this issue which we're discussing, is going to have a dramatic impact in the next 20, 30 years. I'm 50. As I am now I've been in the business. I'm a vitamin manufacturer. I've been interested in vitamins, and I've sold them and dealt with them and used them for 15 years. But as a consumer, I'm now more concerned than ever at my age of what else can I do for preventative health care? Can I get the proper dietary supplementation? Can I get the proper amount of nutrients that I need in my diet? What options? What should I be supplementing now? If that's my attitude, what's that attitude going to be for the countless millions of Americans and this baby boomer bulge that goes through the pot? Well, what's going to happen is when we sit in front of our doctors and he says, well, take Mevacor for your cholesterol, I'm going to say, and what else should I be doing to support that? Because that can't be the only answer. Now, if I do that, what happens when 40 million Americans do that? That doctor is going to have to stand up and take notice. So your question is a very incisive one. It's a really good one, Dennis. I think that's going to help bring the marketplace together. I hope that's going to bring more of these alternative health cares. I think your listeners are going to see dramatic inroads in the years ahead in different type of treatments that will support their medical condition and help both from prevention. Fact of the matter is that you have health because you eat right. You get the proper nutrients and the proper balance. And what dietary supplements are is supplementing your diet, not replacing it, supplementing it. And if we did more of that, we'd all be healthier longer. That's a fact.
Elliot, one thing as an aside, your company is setting the pace in another way. You're one of the first companies to have the new toll-free area code. We're used to hearing 800 numbers. They ran out of 800 numbers. You're going to get an 888 number, which is also free, I understand.
Yes, we've used 888-2-Natrol, and that's 1-888-262-8765. 1-888-2-Natrol. Is that enough of a plug, Dennis? Can I?
That's okay. That's now. Can I have my melatonin?
Yes, you can.
The CEO is a self-made man, Elliot Balbert. We're spending our final few minutes with him. I asked him how his company reacted to the explosion that happened last year. The explosion called melatonin.
Well, we were happily involved in the distribution and marketing of the melatonin product in February of '95, and the explosion really took place in the summer of this past year when the press picked up on it, and with the Newsweek article, and then the extension of all. It's 2020, and Dan Rather, CBS News, it said, don't want to plug the competition here, Dennis, but with that explosion of information.
I think Dan Rather worked for UPI once. Everybody did, including Cronkite at one time, and David Brinkley, so we don't care.
We'll give him the plug. We were well positioned for the explosion of information that came out. We were the primary. We ended up securing more raw material at a time when it was impossible to secure raw material, and as a result of that, Natrol was able to be the grocery store to the world as far as melatonin was concerned. We were able to ship more product to the retail outlets across the country than any other company, and as a result of that, a retail audit a company that does a report ranked the Natral melatonin product as the number one melatonin in the United States and the 12th highest selling dietary supplement of all dietary supplements sold in this country.
What would you say to people about the whole issue? Not to put words in your mouth, but as you get older, you begin to realize the number of days you have left are dwindling, and by golly, you better do something about it.
Well, it's a good question, and if philosophically, the cliches have been talked about. Historians for years have spoken on these issues. The fact of the matter is it's really difficult for most people to come to grips with the facts that they really are in control of their own life. And you are, Dennis, in control of your own life. You can make something happen to yourself. You should. You owe it to the people. You owe it to the people that you love to take care of yourself for them. Even if it's not you that you care about, whether it's the drink that you're having, the cigarette that you're smoking, that's okay. Don't do it for you. Do it for the people that love you, that want you to be around. So whether it's weight loss or smoking or if something ails you, you can do something about it. You can. Anybody, anyone can. Folks out there, you can do more for the people that love you than you realize, and you can do that by the time that you walk away from this radio program and get back to doing what you normally do. You can make one small decision, and being happy, loving the people that are around you, and that'll make a difference. And it's all philosophical mumbo-jumbo, but the fact of the matter is that I just had a bit of an experience where a couple of months ago I suffered from an unexpected and unwanted heart attack, and that's an experience that no one wants to happen. It happens, stuff happens, and I've cleaned up the expression. When you go through that, you come to grips with an issue that you can make a change. You can lose weight. You can start walking in the mornings. You can spend more time with your family and less time at work. You can be healthier for people that love you. Don't do it for you, do it for them, because they love you.
Elliot, thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
A visit to Anaheim, California, to a huge convention where companies were selling and explaining natural products and foods. I'm Dennis Daly.